going live on YouTube. So sorry guys on YouTube. I started late, a little bit late. So you missed my introduction about Adriana, but the main part you didn't miss. You start speaking now. And so one last detail is about the questions. Do you prefer questions at the end? Can we interrupt during the presentation? What do you prefer?
I'm very happy with questions during the presentation. I think they make the discussion more lively.
Okay. So if you have any questions, please just raise your hand or put on the chat. I'll be monitoring here. And also, if you are on YouTube live now, you can put your questions there as well on the chat, and I'll bring here. Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Diogo, for the presentation, and thank you everybody for being here on a Friday afternoon. Lovely weather here in Maastricht. The title of the talk is inspired by a movie I haven't seen yet, and I think once I give this talk again, I'll have to really watch the movie. The bad and the ugly on social media. The good part is left out. And I realized that I would be talking about two contexts that are closer to you. Okay. Am I still being heard?
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Okay. The first context is perhaps you're familiar with is the white helmets, the Syrian defense, the volunteer group from Syria who tasked themselves with saving civilians from various bombing and explosions and terrible things that happened during the very long civil war there. They are known for their humanitarian actions and for their refusal to align to groups or military factions. They were targeted by a disinformation campaign, mainly because they became a voice and a recording force of what was happening in Syria and violence against the civilians. They were publishing videos, they were witnesses of the war crime committed by the regime. And the timeline was, of course, quite long. It included a documentary for which that received Oscar award, and all this information is then used against them. And there are various studies in that quantitatively or qualitatively look at what the disinformation campaign against the white helmets, and various results were shown. For example, that the online discussion about the white helmets is typically dominated by anti-white helmets voices. Basically, there is not a group that says the white helmets are good, because the people who would benefit or would benefit from their services are typically the ones who have no access to the internet or the peace of mind to talk about this. It was also documented that alternative media and government-funded media had a big role in these campaigns. And also that YouTube in particular was one platform that had a lot of content that was meant to basically to promote anti-white helmet narratives. So what I will talk about is a recent paper with students still at USF, in which what we looked at were the campaign across 3 platforms. That's much harder or less easy to do, because you have the platforms with their own way of making data available or not, and then the challenge of connecting the data sets. What we have in this case, we have a series of YouTube videos that have been published since 2014. And we have the date of the publishing, the channel, the English translation of the titles, and the caption. And these are our, let's say, it's a collection of content that now we use to connect the activity on Twitter and the activity on Facebook. On Twitter, we have data from April 2018 to April 2019. So it is now less, it's a smaller range or duration, but we're looking at what videos that already exist have been discussed or promoted during this interval of time. And then we also have Facebook data collected from using CrowdAngle, and again, looking at what was posted from these YouTube videos. We have, of course, an intersection in this case, so we end up with a smaller data set of YouTube videos that were talked about both in Twitter and in Facebook, or in either Twitter or Facebook during the 1 year and a month of our observation time. So we have this ending of the timeline as I'm showing it here. However, the white helmets are still active, and now they are dealing with a lot of COVID situation. So some questions we're asking is, how are the YouTube videos publicized or promoted on Twitter and Facebook? And in this case, we took a heuristic that has been published previously by a different group that looked, suggested a way of determining when two posts of the same URL are suspectedly close to each other to be natural, let's say, to be an organic behavior. And we use that strategy to determine when, if you have two users who post the same content, when their posting times are too close to each other to be natural. So we try to see if we can look at coordinated behavior this way. For the data set we used, we see this 52 seconds as the threshold that says if within 52 seconds, then maybe it's something fishy. It's no guarantee that this is the case, though. It's just a heuristic. And we identify from our intersection of the data sets 144 YouTube videos, 400 some Twitter users, and 160 Facebook users who are engaged in this strange behavior. And this is a bigger picture of what I just showed. Basically, what we have is the red video, the red nodes are the videos, the blue are Twitter users, and when they are connected by an edge, it means they share the same video within 52 seconds. They post it, so it's not about retweeting, it's about tweeting the same URL to one of the videos in our collection within 52 seconds. And you also see these hardcore fans who are connected repeatedly by the same coordination within 52 seconds. And various other patterns that basically this plot is, this graph is just to show that there is some interesting behavior, maybe unexpected. Let's zoom in and see if there is anything more. So what we did then, we project the network as we saw it from the video nodes into the channel nodes. And now we're connecting the users in the same way, but they are connected to the channel they promote rather than with a particular video. However, the orange edges that you see between users are still the promotion of the same URL, therefore the same video within 52 seconds from each other. So what do we see? We see some no names here who are not having much popularity when you look at users who are synchronized within 52 seconds of promoting the content. And you see this big blurb of the connected cluster of channels that are seen as promoting typically conspiracy theories, extremely active in disseminating this information that is damaging to the white helmets, and it's made up information. And basically the narratives typically are that they are a terrorist organization that is sponsored by the West, that they are faking their videos, there is nothing related to it. And all these are, of course, nonsense and shown to be nonsense. So it's what else you see? You see Russia Today with a very big network of synchronized users. You see Russia Today in various languages. We have the German and the American version of Russia Today as well, and UK. They are less connected than others, as you see. And by looking at this data set, which is different from the data sets analyzed in some other papers, we identify the same very active activists in this context. Vanessa Billy is one of them. And within this network, we look at more detailed patterns. Is it something that we could see and we could then maybe design mechanisms for detecting, automatic detection, or some other helpful tools? What I will give you is just a number of patterns that are too bizarre to be organic. One is, we call it distributed amplification, in which a group of users seem to synchronize if they are on a single platform or multiple platforms to promote videos from a particular channel. And we have Russia Today channel being promoted by a group of users. And again, the promotion happens synchronously. And we also have multi-platform synchronization where we have Facebook users or Twitter users connected by the same, by this 52 seconds threshold in their posting of videos from that channel. We also see another pattern, which is coordinated video recurrence, where one user, this blue node in the middle, is repeatedly posting, tweeting the same video from channels. In this case, it's a 16 times the same video with the same text is posted as a tweet by this user. And then some other users are synchronizing in some of the cases within 52 seconds and tweeting the same URL to the same video. You also see, if you look at groups of users who promote videos from different channels, you see that all these channels that are now connected are in fact promoting the same agenda. So even if the videos are different, in fact, many of these videos have the same, very overlapping content. And we saw that not by watching so much, but as by comparing the texts of the translations of the captions, or sometimes the captions already in English. So what you see in this case is these three users trying to, or not trying, but posting content from all these channels. And all these channels happen to have the same agenda. We also see this synchronization where you have different accounts and they promote, again, very different videos in this case with similar agendas. Now, what are the effects of this apparently coordinated campaign? We can ask this question in terms of information diffusion. And the trouble is that it's rather hard to measure or to accurately measure due to limited data. For example, we learned, and we also heard this message from other groups as well, that many of the accounts we're working with or content we have in our data set has been removed by the platform since. For example, our collection of the Facebook users is much more recent than the collection than when the Twitter data was collected. What this means is that Facebook meantime blocked some of the accounts because they were found to be promoting disinformation or to engage in behavior that was against the rules of Facebook. but this is also damaging the science and the transparency of the platforms and the accountability of the platforms in this phenomena. In real life, we know that the effects of disinformation are quite tragic. And if there are any questions at this point, I'll be happy to respond, because I'm moving to another cheerful topic, the vaccination against COVID.
A quick question. I don't know if I missed it, but did you try different time windows instead of 52 seconds, like increase or reduce to see how that would affect the network?
Right. So obviously it shrinks the network or it grows the network. And there is nothing magic in these 52 seconds. The 52 seconds were found by applying a heuristic that said you take the URLs, let's say the videos that are promoted the fastest by looking at the first time a tweet appeared with that URL and the second time another tweet appeared with that URL. You take the fastest such promoted videos, and then you take only the top 10% of those. And then you look how long does it take for those to reach 50% of their popularity. And then this gave us in the data set the 52 seconds. Now, if you constrain the criteria more, you get smaller of these patterns. If you relax more and say, I'll take the top 50% or I'll take the top something, you have a much, and I will show, in fact, an example. No, I won't show it, but we've seen such an example. And the problem is you don't know where to stop, right? You can see this degradation of patterns or increase of patterns, but you don't know exactly where to stop. Yeah. All right. So the second part of the talk looks at basically the moment when the AstraZeneca vaccine trials.
And then we have one question in
yes.
the chat, like before we move to this one. Did you look at the views counts for the different videos and the different promotion types? Like sock puppets drive more
right,
views
okay.
or something?
And this is a complaint against so if I looked at the view counts for the videos that were promoted by different strategies.
Yeah.
This is the problem with the YouTube data, is that it doesn't give you the view counts over time. It only gives you the view counts as of the time of the collection. So you can't say when you can't say when the coordination seemed to have happened, right? When Twitter and Facebook users were posted the content, but you do not see how the view count varied over time, such that you see, okay, and after this coordination happened, the increase in views was that much. Yeah, am I answering the question? So because of this, you can only look now, let's say, or by the time of the data collection. And this is not very telling because some of the videos were posted in 2014, or some of the videos were posted in 2016, and so on. In addition to this, there are various other events that promoted a particular video or not. And we don't have data to distinguish between various events. Okay. There is another one in chat.
No, it's just a comment saying that a common problem with this type of data.
Yeah, this is my complaint now about the opacity of the platforms and the lack of accountability and this game of hiding a way to save face when the science could help them deal with a problem that clearly is much bigger than they expected. So in the second part of the talk, we're looking at the conversations on Twitter only, in this case, related to AstraZeneca vaccines in the time when there was a stop in the trials because of an unexplained illness in one of the subjects of the trial. So we have the data set. This one is public, the data was collected in August and September of 2020 with a hiccup that often happens when you're collecting data. This is missing data in the data set. And on September 8th, is around here, where there is an obvious peak in conversations, is when the trials were stopped temporarily. What are we asking in this case? We're trying to see who is engaging in conversation, and especially who is providing content that is being now sent on Twitter. And we're looking at URLs. URLs are they are rich enough that they give you content in addition to the 140 characters or whatever they are. So we looked at the URLs that are within the Twitter messages collected during this time. And we only looked at the tweets with URLs, and we had to scrap to clean the data set such that URLs to Twitter itself are ignored, and trying to then to remove the HTML parameters and so on. In addition to this, we enrich the data by using a module in Python that looks at the content of the URLs would be, and we learn various things like language from using that model. Also, we used the media bias fact check, which is an open, it's a website that gives you the credibility of the information sources. And we used a system called VirusTotal that looks at websites and how reliable they are from various perspectives. What do we learn very quickly? We see that SputnikNews.com, again, is a popular web domain. Its URLs related to this domain have been circulated a lot in these Twitter conversations. However, it appears that this can be due to the fact that they publish in many languages. It's a news site from Russia. Then we see also that Russia Today, again, is highly active in the sense that despite the fact that it has relatively small URLs, different articles related to AstraZeneca during the period of our observation, it gets lots of users and mentions. So it is a popular site. Again, Russia Today has sites in many languages. Now, the low credibility URLs, as identified by media bias fact checking, and how many mentions and users appear are also listed in this case. We have some media sites, but we also have childrenhealthdefense.org is engaged in all sorts of conspiracy theories and anti-vaxxing activity, let's say. The gatewaypundit.com is another one that is the so-called alternative media that doesn't have much credibility. The languages were diverse, which just explains how the population of the globe was interested in the vaccine trials. What is interesting also is that by looking at these URLs, we also look to see what is the credibility of the websites from a very systems perspective in computer science. This virus, how did I call it? VirusTotal has a number of engines, I think 70 engines that look at different things, like the age of the website, the number of name servers, and so on. And they use a way to basically to question the validity or the trustiness of the website, of the hosting domain, basically. And we discovered that quite a number of these, let's say 400, were detected by at least one of the engines as being malicious. And we also see that 25% of these malicious URLs use shortening services, compared to under 1% of the URLs that were not discovered by this engine to be malicious. This could be an attempt of hiding identity behind a short name. And if we look at the same type of behavior as before, can we see coordination? So we again take the median time that it takes for the top 10% quickest URLs to reach 50% of their share. Do we see any signs of apparent coordination? Now, because we don't have a continuous data set due to the missing data, we had to break this into two to look at the August data and the September data. And you see also that there is a very different profile in the volume. The August conversations were high, and then they started very low or relatively low in September, and then they peaked after AstraZeneca trials stopped. So we ended up with different values by using this magic heuristic of 2 seconds for the first interval, which is about 10 days in August, and 6 seconds for the September interval, which is 10, 11 days. So comparable durations, different number of URLs posted, but many more different tweets. More tweets in the September overall than in August that contain URLs. However, we also look at only the URLs that are posted at least twice, because if we are to look at coordination, you cannot have coordination if a URL is posted only once in a data set. You need at least 2 users to post a URL. Therefore, it's a smaller set of URLs we look at. What do we see? We see now two networks, the August and the September. And in these networks, we have the nodes being users. They are connected only if they posted at least twice with another user within the threshold discovered previously. So basically what it means is that these 3 guys, or let's take a pair, they exist only because their weight is larger than 1, because the dyads of weight 1 have been removed such that we eliminate the by chance something new appeared, therefore I will tweet and you will tweet as well. But by chance, we twice tweet within 6 seconds from each other the same URL. It can be a different URL, but at least twice we do that. And then what we see interesting, first of all, it's more of these patterns are seen in September than in August, but this can be due also to a larger number of users engaging. But we see these groupings that are not large, but persistent. They do promote the same URLs repeatedly. And what we show in the cloud is the domains from which those URLs were posted. What we also show is a lot of these conversations are aimed at the Spanish speaker population in South America, who are likely the target, the customer target, let's say, for the Sputnik 5 vaccine. Despite the fact that the collection of data was not focused on Sputnik, we do see a lot of Sputnik 5 vaccine, the Russian vaccine. And we believe that the reason is because it was, I think, released during the time of the observation period. So what we see, to summarize the AstraZeneca study, is the heavy presence of malicious and low credibility URLs. The unusual shortening of, or the proportion of shortened URLs within the group of malicious URLs. So first you look at different website hosting properties and you discover that in fact the URLs are also shortened. And it might be some possible signs of coordination. I think it's much less obvious than in the case of the white helmets, but it's still suspicious that maybe some sites are being coordinated by a network of, let's call them fans. And what are the questions that we can't answer? One is the important one, which is how many of these patterns we discover are indeed part of coordinated efforts, how many other patterns are we missing? What are the effects of the coordination on information diffusion? This was the question earlier about how much more the videos were seen if they were part of a coordination campaign. Can we generalize this to different contexts, and what would be strategies for doing this? And finally, can we define hooks into social media platforms to collect useful data for reproducibility, or even to get the platforms be more transparent and accountable? Because the state of the art seemed to be the data is king, and whatever the platforms give us, that's what, or give us through the API, is what we have. And we may do quality research, but with tied hands. We discover that the data, of course, is biased, incomplete, messy, wrong. Imperfect labeling, for example, using NLPs, it's very common in these data sets. The accounts have been removed by platforms, which again makes it hard to replicate the data. A student here discovered, for example, that in a hate speech data set that was published many years ago, maybe 6 years ago, only 6% of the content is still available on Twitter, which means it's impossible to reproduce the study of the paper that showed how much hate speech existed in a particular time on Twitter. And then there is this effort of obscuring information because of supposedly user privacy. And then there is a question, do all the accounts deserve privacy, especially when they engage in disinformation, for example? But I would like to finish on a more optimistic note. What do we do with that? I think I'm putting technical solutions because I'm a computer scientist and I'm talking to computer scientists, but I think our power is limited. I think what we do now is we can't build tools to fix the world in this case, but maybe we can build tools to help with education, digital literacy. Maybe we can build tools to help regulations by helping legislation and enforcement, and somehow help the platforms or force the platforms to provide more transparency and accountability. And this work was supported by the DARPA Social SIM project and has been done with a team of collaborators from USF. And thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to take questions or more questions.
Yolanda, very good. Dan, you're the first. Go ahead.
Thanks, Joe. Really interesting, Amanda, thank you. Do you think or do you know whether the platforms are undertaking this sort of research themselves, and that's why they're almost maybe one step ahead, or taking the action that they're taking in terms of making some of the data less transparent?
I know, I mean, we know, right? We know that there is research now, or we now know that there is research done on Instagram, Facebook, where they looked at other things. They are not in the business of publishing results. And depending on, I think the platforms have different cultures. Twitter tends to be a bit more transparent than Facebook. Facebook is extremely opaque. And recent revelations from the whistleblower in the States show that basically they know stuff. They have the data. They have much more data than we do. And they have amazing teams of computer scientists and data scientists and anthropologists and so on, who could do amazing stuff in terms of solving some of these problems. And yes, but it's a matter of priorities, and it doesn't look like the priorities are of making this information environment more healthy. I think the priorities are in making money or saving face. which I think it's counterproductive to the problems we're facing. They do not publish papers, typically. The papers that come out of them, of the platforms, are typically from the internal scientists, and I suspect they go through rigorous checking. I don't think you can publish as a scientist whatever you want if you are inside Facebook.
Thank you.
Question? I have a quick one. I've been questioning myself a lot about this information and who is responsible for spreading, who is benefiting, who is being harmed the most. Because we usually work with this type of data, the data that is available for us, and this data mostly have like active information, like people who are sharing or people who are liking, but we don't see behind the scenes, we don't see who actually read those information or the potential impact who those things get into. On the other side, like for instance, I use a lot WhatsApp. I think most for South Americans use a lot WhatsApp groups, and this data is not available at all, like unless you join these public groups. But I see every day in my family groups, misinformation going on, and I in these two different words, when I see, every time when I see Twitter and this type of work, like relate to big events or big hatreds, such as the white helmet, we always have in our mind, okay, there is a bad player out there that is either making money with clicks, so they are sharing this because it's polemic somehow, and they get money with clicks, or there are someone interested with very financial, economical purpose behind. I want to take down AstraZeneca because I want to release my vaccine, or I have my political incentives to promote some discussion here. But in this other world, like my WhatsApp family group, I don't see my family, my mother, my uncles with this motivation. They are sharing because they believe in something. So what do you think is who is responsible for the crisis that we currently live, like the crisis of misinformation? Is the individual with no big intentions, or big corporations, either the platform that allow or someone that have the power of making money on that thing?
I'm sure it's from case to case, and I don't know if I know enough to answer this question. So I think your question is, are the unwitting crowds, the one who would forward nonsense, the most responsible for disinformation, or are the content promoters, the corporate, the coordinated promoters, the ones who are doing it? Or are the platforms with their algorithms who are promoting content that leads to clicks, basically? I do not know, and I don't know if it's known, or even if it's measurable outside the platforms. I think the platforms have the data to look at this, to see how much damage is done by unwitting crowds versus coordinated efforts. But I think it also depends from case to case. If there are, as you say, financial interests, you will have perhaps coordinated financial or political, assuming they are disconnected. But if you have this, interests, you might have coordinated behavior. But if it's something that relates to more, emotional stuff, children, cats, and such, you might have the unwitting crowds doing the damage. And who is responsible? Well, the fact that the platforms developed with absolutely no rules, and now the lawyers, at least in EU, are trying, from my understanding, which is rather limited, are trying to address this problem, but it's not clear how would be enforceable. If Facebook is dumping all the data on a government now and says, fine, look at this, and tell me what or find what you want, I don't think anything can happen. So it's I think that in a way the governments are a bit late, or the legislator is a bit late in deciding where these platforms should be accountable and transparent and how. And then there is this discussion of which governments do you really trust, and should this power be allowed in, or transparency towards every government.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated problem. I think only education maybe, and I'm talking about digital literacy. If people are aware what's nonsense and what's not, then the effect of this disinformation, if they are campaigns or unmeeting crowds, is much less. So then maybe there is a less of a damage.
I keep thinking about this because, like, we should focus our efforts. So what's the best way to try to reduce this amount of, is focus on the platforms, is focus on big coordinated groups, is try to focus on normal people and educate them somehow. What's the fastest way to solve this problem?
I think it's all. I don't think we have one solution. I do believe education is very important, and it's education of the older people, or the ones that are not necessarily in school now. So, but are we educating our students first? Are they all trained everywhere on the globe, since they are now on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever they are?
I have heard something related to this, like people work with old people. So I want to throw here just very polemic, and I want you to hear what your opinion about it. But I don't remember was the subject, but it was like the older people are more susceptible to this kind of problems, and at the same point, like they're less literate, digital literate, but at the same point they will die soon. So you don't need to care. You don't need to care with them. Like, focus on the youth. If you educate the youth, you solve the problem in the future. So what do you think about that?
I will not say what I think about that. No, I don't believe you can ignore a large percent of the population because they will die in the next 10 or 20 years. Because the damage in the next 10 or 20 years is huge. If you only look at the climate change discussions and the fact that, so I don't think we can ignore a segment of the population. And I don't want to know who came up with this proposal. Yeah. I think Hugo has a question.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. My question is, this is a battle, right? It's a multi-party battle that is being fought by governments, organizations, us researchers, the academia, and so on. But even in war, there are rules that all the parties involved, they have to abide to.
Yes.
And in this case, it doesn't seem that this battle, the different parties, they are following the same rules. Do you think that this could be a lost battle just because one side of this war is playing by completely different set of rules than the people who are trying to fight them, to the point that nowadays we are going to be the elder populations in the future. And if the technologies, the methods, the strategies, the agenda changes faster than how fast we can adapt to them, we're going to be the ones struggling to identifying misinformation in 10, 15 years time. So do you think that this could be a lost battle if we don't change something that's more fundamental in this system?
I do believe we need a fundamental change. I don't believe that's what I think. It's band-aids. Even if we have a perfect system that discovers what is information and labels, let's say on a grade of 0 to 10, how much disinformation we have in a content. Even if we had that magic thing, which I think it's extremely hard, because it's not about stating untruths. It's about questioning if the earth is round, for example. Is that disinformation? I'm implying that it's not, and we're being manipulated. We're saying just, in fact, it's flat. But I'm not saying it's flat. I'm just questioning it, right? Is that disinformation, or is it correct information? So we do need a very significant change. And I think the change cannot happen from one side, and it has to happen. Imagine that. Okay, let's take an absurd scenario that somehow the algorithm for promoting content at Facebook and at Twitter and everywhere is changed. So the incendiary messages about a new coup somewhere are not being promoted, because those are the things that people go crazy about, and they will get more views. What will be? I don't know. We don't even have a system to say what will happen. So we do need, I think we need the laws, frankly. We need enforcement that says, but says what? I don't know. Maybe this is where we as computer scientists need to help them, or data scientists need to help the legislation and say, guys, you might want to ask for this particular type of data in aggregate or in or raw, such that you help us do auditing on your platforms. I think it's a very hard problem, but I will say, I don't believe, or no, I don't want to state that the battle is lost. I don't want to accept the battle is lost. I think there must be something to be done by all forces involved, rather than by only, clearly the platforms cannot do it because it's against their business model. It's against what they are.
And I think the malicious actors, they are not gonna change the way they're operating, only to make it worse, right? So yeah, it has to be something that's gonna have to come from.
Well, imagine that you have to pay 5 cents, pennies, whatever you have, for every retweet, or and 10 cents for every tweet. Would this bring friction in the system, such that if you really have something to say, you say it and you pay for it? And if you are in the business of promoting these things, it has to cost you. I don't know. There must be solutions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Marcos commented something. I don't know if this is exactly what I'm saying, but right now we are trying. Yeah, we are trying to detect misinformation. Hopefully, we won't get to the point that we need to detect true information, right? It is still minority, hopefully, in the vast. But yeah, the problem is not like the amount of certainty that we have about something, but it's if you have enough doubt, and this is breaking the system. If you generate enough doubt, then everything is possible, everything is debatable. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, any other questions? If not,
I can ask another question.
Yeah, we still have time.
What do you think about limiting the reach of messages on this platform in terms of number of hops that they can reach, such that if a message is important, a single source message is of national importance, then it's going to have multiple origins, and then it's going to reach the entire population. But a single source message that tries to reach a global scale, it might not be that useful. So limiting the hop could say, okay, it's a single source message with local interest, then it makes sense. Then what are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on where you apply the system. You can create monsters, right? If you're thinking of a political system that is against its citizens, you basically took all the good out of the good, the ugly, and the bad, from my title, which, you know, because one of the good points about these platforms is they enable people to have a voice. Now, the problem is that they enable all people to have a voice, but who is to say which people should have a voice? And are you in a country with censorship, for example, or an autocratic country, I should not name any now, but where the only voice that could be heard would be the official one? Is that a good thing? So no, because you now move the problem to allowing only some people to have a voice. And how do you vet those people?
No, I mean, not only like limiting who's going to have a voice, but anyone can have a voice, but your message cannot spread beyond 2 or 3 hops
away.
Such that it's going to have a limited reach, each message you create.
This is a way of having friction in the system, no? In a way?
I think this is what happened now with WhatsApp, right? You can only share, broadcast to, I think, five person or 5 groups.
But you can make a deep tree, because I'm getting, for example, things that are saying forwarded many times.
Yeah, but it's not from you, but someone can go. So you still can reach everyone, but not at the single shot.
Not so, yeah. So this is one way of having friction in the system by making basically the broadcast tree not very deep, but with a small number of a small branching factor. No? Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe there is some merit in this idea of limiting the spread of information.
It's really hard, like, because we can claim both sides, because at the same point we see that people who are really malicious and trying to spread, they have already this structure to replicate or to pass by the system and have all this structure. So they, if we implement all these constraints, they will still be able to manage. But the normal citizens that have simply a good idea to try to spread this, they won't spread.
And it's true. And the technical solutions to this problem would do the same as security now, the security area, right? You find a patch and there will be a way around it. So it's the typical struggle between solving this particular problem and then creating another one, and then you solve another one. So.
Okay, so time is over for us. Thank you, Anda, so much for this.
Thank you for inviting me.
For this talk and these provoking thoughts that you share with us. And hopefully we'll see in person soon.
Looking forward to that moment, which I think we're going into deeper lockdown here. But everybody be well. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you for those who attended. Bye.